Kim Stanley Robinson has been a major fixture of American SF for 30 years. Best known for his Mars trilogy from the 1990s, each of his recent novels have been a major event, and he's a particularly important figure in climate fiction. This episode takes a look at an early and lesser known book by KSR. Icehenge was first published in 1984 and consists of a wide-ranging tour of the future of our solar system. Over the course of 3 linked novellas, Robinson examines the thorny topics of revolution, knowledge, and human longevity. All are linked to the structure of the title, a giant mysterious artefact discovered on the surface of Pluto. Welcome to episode 146, and the worrying thought of having to live for 1,000 years under a repressive system-wide government. Keep listening to the end of the episode when I'll respond to a recent mailbag message and remind you of how you also can get in touch. On Mars, experienced archaeologist Hjalmar Nederland is excavating the ruins of a domed city destroyed hundreds of years earlier. Nederland knows he's digging up his own birthplace. He is 310 years old. It's only the written record that tells him about his origins in New Houston, however. While biotechnology allows humans to live for over 600 years, their memories can cover only a fraction of that time. Knowledge, then, is a site of struggle, because he who controls the past controls the future. Originally published in 1984, Icehenge is an early book by the American science fiction writer Kim Stanley Robinson. Rather than a true novel, it's a set of 3 linked novellas, 2 of which have been published previously. While these stories are a clear precursor to Robinson's better-known Mars trilogy from 1993 to 1996, they have a unique power of their own. With settings that range across our solar system, Icehenge is a thought-provoking exploration of the struggle for evolution, the uses and abuses of knowledge, and the personal and social effects of extreme human longevity. In the future imagined in Icehenge, great strides have been made in space exploration, and humans have colonised much of the solar system. On Earth, the Soviet Union still exists, and the Cold War continues. Mars is run by a repressive committee which exposes colonists to the worst of both the American and Soviet systems. Part 1 is set in 2248 and takes the form of a journal written by Emma Weil, a specialist in life support systems. She serves on a mining vessel which is abruptly captured by its mutinous crew and then joined by 2 other ships commandeered in the same way. The mutineers are revolutionaries led by Weil's former lover, the charismatic Davidov. Weil debates whether to assist the rebels with their reckless mission, to link the mining vessels into a jury-rigged starship and attempt to found a rogue colony. Part 2 is set in 2547 and focuses on archaeologist Hjalmar Nederland. He gains long-awaited permission to excavate the ruins of the Martian city of New Houston, destroyed during an uprising 300 years earlier. Nederland does not believe the official story, which is that revolutionaries destroyed their own city and caused the deaths of thousands. He uncovers evidence, including Weil's journal, which appears to support his theory that the committee were responsible for the massacre, but covered it up. However, he's overshadowed by the discovery of a mysterious structure on Pluto. Part 3 is set in 2610 and follows Edmund Doyer, a blue-collar worker, amateur archaeologist, and the great-grandson of Hjalmar Nederland. He doggedly follows the case of the Icehenge discovered on Pluto, and eventually gets the chance to visit it. He's determined to discover whether the structure was built by Davidov's revolutionaries, by benign aliens, or, in his favoured theory, that it was the work of a hugely wealthy hoaxer who fabricated Weil's journal. In one way or another, the desire for revolution hangs over all of the linked stories. In Part 1, Emma is faced with a choice: leave the solar system altogether in an attempt to found a new colony, or return to Mars and join the revolutionary movement there. She must make her choice while believing that both initiatives are doomed to fail. Robinson describes the powerful desire for change, which may fade but does not disappear forever, even in the face of impossible odds. In Part 2, Nederland hopes that uncovering the truth of the events on Mars in 2248 will help to bring down the repressive committee. He wrestles with the knowledge that his ability to even attempt this is a result of his personal relationship with a powerful politician. He's compromised even as he pursues the truth as he sees it. Joe Walton described Part 2 as a strange dance of despair, about how history is something we constantly revise and reimagine. On one level, this is a struggle between Nederland and the state. The evidence that Nederland uncovers of the committee's war crimes is simply absorbed by them, weaved into a narrative over which they retain control. As the book puts it, your victories are sucked in and used just as efficiently as your defeats. On a smaller scale, it's the history of people's own lives which are being reimagined. In Robinson's version of human longevity, a person can live for several hundred years, but can remember only 80 or 90. The writing of journals becomes widespread as people feel a need to document their own lives. In Part 3, Edmund Dwyer comes to believe that he's finally explained the structure on Pluto and accuses the person he believes to be the guilty party. His knowledge of what may be the truth is dwarfed by their enormous wealth and power. Like revolutionary change, in Icehenge, truth is something that the characters seek obsessively at great personal risk and with little confidence of success, and yet there is hope. Robinson movingly describes the potential social and personal effects of extreme human longevity. When at one point Nederland is addressed by name by a stranger, he assumes she's familiar with his work. She turns out to be his 60-year-old granddaughter, whom he's never previously met. Despite the restrictions on procreation, a 300-year-old has more living descendants than they can, or wish to, keep track of. A longer life also gives people a greater stake in and responsibility for the future, for better or worse. As Nederland puts it in a moment of frustration, now we're all going to live 1,000 years, and we're going to have to live in the system we make for year after year beyond our ability to imagine. No longer can people ignore problems, leaving them to future generations to figure out. Greatly increased lifespans would mean that the future would be something everyone would genuinely have to confront. Would this shift help today's societies confront their seemingly insoluble threats, not least climate breakdown? The desire for revolution, searches for truth, and extended lifespans in Icehenge all shed light on what's arguably Robinson's principal theme, the struggle for meaning. All of his characters search for meaning not only in the abstract mysteries of the Icehenge itself, but also in the equally confusing realities of their own long lives. All too often they're frustrated by political machinations, personal frailties, and the base strangeness of the universe and life itself. Robinson's often poetic prose brings these searches to vivid life. This is humane and thoughtful SF, and an underrated part of the author's early career. So as promised, it's time to have a look back at a message that I received recently and respond to that. This is a message that I got from Paul from Dunstable here in the UK, which I received via text message, which is one of the ways that you can get in touch with me about the show. Paul said, recommend Caves of Steel by Isaac Asimov, which was recommended to me by Andy Weir, who also writes some great sci-fi, but might be a bit too modern for you. Plus, if you ever do any more film reviews, I will re-recommend Phase 4. So thank you for that, Paul. I wish I could be a bit more positive about your recommendation of The Caves of Steel, but I did read that a few years ago. I don't like Isaac Asimov at all, really. I find Asimov's style to be quite dated, sometimes in an amusing way when characters say things like "jumping Jupiter," but generally in a less amusing way. And I must admit, one of the reasons I read less Asimov is because I really kind of object to him as a person. I think Asimov was an incredible misogynist, which I think is reflected very strongly in his work. And it's also reflected very strongly in his behaviour. So we know now, and more people should know, I think, that Asimov was a serial sexual harasser of women and was absolutely notorious for doing that. On the subject of the Caves of Steel in particular, I can see why lots of people like it. I think if you like mystery stories and you want to see a mystery story in an SF context, I can see why people would like it very much. But mysteries are not really my thing. I find Asimov's sort of famous squeamishness quite funny, because the murder in the Caves of Steel happens before the book opens. Partly because Asimov was just very squeamish and didn't really want to write a murder scene, which again I find quite funny. So yeah, I'm not fond of that. Andy Weir, I haven't read any of Andy Weir's works. Obviously he's a guy who's become enormously successful, a huge seller. I have seen the film of The Martian, Ridley Scott's film of The Martian, which I do like quite a lot, so I may have to get around to reading some of his stuff at some point. But there's so many old books to catch up with, so maybe in 30 years, when The Martian has become old, I may catch up with it, or maybe before then, more seriously. And Phase 4, the film Phase 4, which Paul has emailed me about before and recommended, I haven't got around to watching that yet. It does sound interesting. It gets quite a mixed reception, I think, but some of the best gems do, don't they? They get a mixed reception. So I'm looking forward to giving that a go. So thank you very much, Paul, for getting in touch. And as a reminder, you can reach me via text message and various other ways. And the way to do that is just by following a link in the show description. Thanks for listening. For more classic science fiction reviews, visit andyjohnson.xyz. You can also find the show on YouTube and follow updates on Blue Sky. In both cases, just search Classic SF with Andy Johnson. Finally, to get in touch, use the contact form on my site or hit the link in the episode description to send a text message.